Hello. So how you doing, Rahul? How you doing on getting your lamp stack installed on something? You think you got it, but not sure if it works? You want to look at it in front of the class? Why aren't you sure it works? You tried doing the nano part, but nothing happened. What do you mean nothing happened? When you ran nano. Can we use you as a guinea pig today? Like a blank screen. It may not be blank, it may be that you can't see it, but you want to show me what you're talking about? Maybe what I'll do is I'll log into your container or VM for you rather than you sharing your screen. We'll just do it on mine. So anyway, for those of you that just joined us, I want to look at some specific examples. So Rahul's offered to let us look at his, and if anybody else wants me to look at their container or VM to see if we can get you over some specific hurdles which are causing you not to move forward with installing the lamp stack. We need to figure out where that's breaking down, container 401. So you're on team 4 then? Okay. And then I want to show you a couple of other things, partly to do with security, and get you guys to understand the concept of what mostly we're doing with respect to using open systems is picking and choosing tools, picking and choosing applications that have already been written. We're not writing code. We might be writing a teeny bit of what we call code, but it's not really code. It's scripting, or we're modifying configurations. Now, Dr. Parks a while back had said, you need to teach them coding. And I said, that might be true for some of them. For some people, they might need to learn coding, but I find that it's less important as a business major, as an MIS major, to know how to code, and more important, to know how to manage code that's already been written. Be able to take pieces of code, take applications, take procedures, take best practices, and glue them together, or use them for the benefit of your company or your organization or what you're trying to do. You don't have to, as a car driver, for example, a race car driver, for example. Let's take a race car driver. Professional race car drivers, very good drivers. Many of them don't know, they could not rebuild a car if they had to. Some of them can, but a lot of them don't know where all the nuts and bolts go. They just know how to use that car once it's given to them, assuming it's operating properly. And that's true for most people that drive cars. We're less knowledgeable about the technology and the hardware of the car. And that's because cars are getting better. That's because there's more people that are performing the maintenance. And, it used to be when you bought a car, back, I'm not talking about the 20s or 30s, I'm talking about 50s and 60s. When you bought a car, especially if you were a young person, you had to learn how to work on that car and repair that car yourself, because either it was too expensive to get somebody else to do it, or there just weren't people around to do it because you lived in a rural area, and the cars were not very reliable in the 50s and 60s. So now we have much more reliable operating systems. Linux has become a very robust, very serious operating system, to the point of where it's on 90% of everything in the world. The coding that the scripting languages that we're using, and the coding that is being used is very run-of-the-mill and average and day-to-day and standardized. So And also the people, there's many more people in the world writing code. If you want to become a programmer or a coder, you're not going to probably make as much money. I used to make a lot of money as a programmer. I used to write a lot of code. I've probably written 2 or 3 million lines of code, brand new code. But I don't really write code much anymore. I do a lot of configuring, a lot of gluing together. I do a lot of modification of configuration files, which is complex in and of itself. So that's what I'm trying to teach you guys about, is picking the right base operating systems, putting the needed packages on top of those, how to modify the configurations for those particular packages, how to add additional sub-tools on top of those packages, how to use those packages to create and maintain content, create and maintain security. We'll get to some security. In fact, I'm going to show you a little bit of security that I was dealing with right now. Let me share my screen here real quick and show you one of the things that I was doing, because it sort of involves what we're doing. So I have, among other things, I have a lot of automation that watches my networks. I have watchdogs, we call them watchdogs, that are programs which periodically ping or monitor or attempt to log in to make sure a certain server is up. And then also I have applications which are monitoring logs to look for anomalies in logs, like a certain number of failed login attempts, for example. One of the #1 issues and #1 concerns right now with respect to data that's out there on the internet and servers that are on the internet, since everything's out on the internet, is unauthorized access. We have to be able to give access to people, particularly because we're all working at home now. So there's doors, there's locks on these doors. Some locks are better than others. We can't over-securitize things. You can't make security so complex that it takes so long to get in the door or get out the door that it renders the tool or the application or the server or the service too unwieldy to use. If it takes you 10 minutes to get into a vehicle and drive it somewhere, you're not going to drive that vehicle. You're going to go, screw this, let me just go walk, or let me ride a bike, or let me just hop on the bus or whatever. Why try to get into this very secure vehicle? So consider that security, there's a fine line, not even that fine. There's a line or a point at which security becomes too much. It's too much to remember. It's too much to deal with. And this is why we're trying to replace a lot of the security requirement that used to be up here with things like biometrics, like scanning our fingers, two-way authentication, and as I'm going to show you here, monitoring software, and one that I use, and I'm going to want everybody to try installing this. This is not right now, not today, just showing you this, and that's only because it came up. It's called Fail to Ban. It's probably the most commonly used tool. It's a little bit of code that runs on servers. Blow that up a little bit here. Fail to ban, and it doesn't usually come with most distributions. You usually have to download and install it, but it does come with some. Fail to ban scans through your log files. Now, I hope everybody knows what a log file is, but every service or server program that's running on most servers, whether they're Windows servers or Linux servers, like Apache Web Server, for example, they generate one or more logs. There might, like in the case of Apache, it generates an access log. It also generates an error log. There might be security logs. There could be 4, 5, or 6, or 10 logs associated with one particular application. So in the case of Apache, for example, there is an access log and an error log. In the case of SSH, for example, you know, I had wanted you guys to attempt to open up SSH. We haven't really talked much about that yet, but you are starting to use SSH to communicate with your servers at the command line level so that we can do more expert things. So you're firing up PuTTY to use SSH. So if I wanted to get to, let's see if I saved any of it over here. Now I'm actually in the lab today, so I'm going to manually type in 192.168. I'm going to just randomly go to team 4 because Rahul had mentioned something. So I'm just going to manually, randomly go there. 192.168.20.200 colon, no, not colon, excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Maybe I made a mistake on that. Hang on one second. Oh, I typed in port 11 instead of port 22. Excuse me. Getting that little warning. That's because I've never accessed this particular server with this machine yet. I'll log in as root. Okay. Well, I made a mistake. Hang on one sec for me. Notice how it paused, by the way. That's a very common thing for it to now pause. It's not thinking about anything. Now I've logged in. Why do you think it paused, by the way? Anybody? Why do you think it paused for a minute before it says, that was invalid, please try again? And that's only been a fairly recent development in terms of accessing systems with a username and password. Why is it pausing? Anyone? Nobody has any idea? Well, it's because back in the old days when it didn't pause, you know, because these computers are pretty fast and this is not a very complex application. Asking for a username, okay, password, okay, let me look that up. Yes or no, pretty simple lookup. If I was a hacker, I could write a piece of code to do this, to log into this and just try random usernames and random passwords over and over and over. And my program can run 1,000 times faster than any human could sit there and brute force attack. That's silly stuff that you see in the movies, where there's a guy trying to brute force his way into a nuclear missile site so he can launch the nuclear missiles and blow up the White House or whatever. That's all a bunch of crap. Hackers don't hack that way. They write code which looks for certain strings on, you know, they have a list of servers they want to hit. Then they look for certain strings, like the word OGIN, colon. If they see that, they go, let me try root, let me try, you know, different names, John, a bunch of random common names, and a bunch of random passwords, Star Trek, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the name of the server, things like that from a database. It can, the hacker programs can run and try that thousands of times per minute. So the reason that pauses there is for a security stop, so that if there was a hacker program running to try to get into this server, it has to wait 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000. No, it was wrong. Try again. Okay, now I'm going to try again. In other words, it turns computer hacker programs back into humans, and they give up. So that's one thing that's done to be preventive. Another thing that's done is that, like I said, every application, every service that you're running, and there is a service And keep this in mind. Let me open up WordPad here. And we'll get to your issue in a minute. We'll get to looking at the VMs in a minute, the container stuff, but I want to point out these items today. So service is a program that is running in the background, is what we call it. Waiting, it's just simply waiting for a client program. I'm sorry, I'm probably making typos, can't see that very well. It's just waiting for a client service to hit it, a web browser to hit this server. So it's running in the background. That's what you use the PS command for, to look at all the background processes that are running. We also call those, as I mentioned before, a daemon, something that's running in the background by itself. Some people call them bots or robots. Most of the processes, most of the services that you run on a Linux server, as well as Windows, but usually Linux, end in the letter D, because that D stands for daemon. So if we're using a protocol like HTTP for web surfing, in many cases, the name of the actual program running on the server is called HTTPD. Now, in the case of Ubuntu, it's called Apache 2, but in the case of CentOS and Debian, it's called, or not Debian, CentOS and Fedora, it's called HTTPD. There is an SSHD, which is running, that's the program that's waiting for you to log in here. It's the service that's allowing me to log in. If you type in PS AWUX, and we're going to grep for search for SSH, we will see that there is, let me make this a little bit bigger. There's possible multiple matches here, but it is literally that one right there. And maybe that one. There might be a couple there, but there's an SSH service running. Now, if I kill that service, then I can no longer log in via SSH. If I restart it, I can, but if I kill it, nobody can log in via SSH. Keep that in mind, that there are many processes running that end in SSHD, or if they end in the letter D. On most Linux systems, almost all Linux systems, there is a folder that you need to care about. And I'm getting to answering Rahul's question as you were trying to use Nano to edit a configuration file and nothing was going on. You probably weren't in the right folder. You probably weren't looking at or editing, or nanoing, they call it, the correct configuration file because you were in the wrong folder. Most of the files that you want to edit, the configuration files, live in the etc. directory. You type in ls space minus la there, and I'm going to use the pipe command and pipe that through the less command, so I get one screen at a time. You can see that there are many comp files. Now, each entry here, if there's a D, that means that's a whole folder, that's a whole directory. So there's a directory there called alternatives, and I can go into that directory and see what's in there. But let me scroll down here. I'm looking for SSH, looking for that on purpose because I want to show you stuff. Okay, so there, yeah. Okay, so here's SSH. It's a whole directory. So sometimes you will find that there's just one file, a comp file within this folder. But sometimes you'll find a whole directory. So you need to go there and look if you're just seeing what services are available there that might be running. So start with the PS AWUX and see what services are running. Most of those things that are in brackets are system processes that are not anything that we care about. They're doing basic I/O. And there's some of the early numbers, but if we scroll past all of that, we start to see these ones here which have a / in front of them. These are processes that have been specifically turned on by either choices that we made when we did the installation or things that we installed and turned on. So there's a watchdog running, by the way, watchdog program. There's a syslog program running. There's a data bus. There's LCFX. And we're in Proxmox, so it's going to be a little bit different looking than your containers or your VMs, which you'll have an Apache process running. So somewhere in that list, it better be some reference to SSH or SSHD. Promise it's running. There it is. There's SSHD. So that tells me, okay, there's a process running called SSHD. There's probably a configuration file in the etc. folder, either called SSHD conf or maybe SSH conf, or maybe there's a whole folder called SSH, which I did find that. So let's go look in the SSH folder. Okay, we see there something called moduli. Let's just skip that. We see something there called SSH config. Then we see SSHD config. Excuse me. Why do you think there's two of those? Why is there an SSH config and an SSHD config? Take a wild guess. Or not so wild. It's because I don't see anybody typing anything. Don't hear anything yet. Are you guys awake? Are you hearing me? Type yes if you're there. Type I want an A in this class if you're there. Anybody that doesn't type that's not getting an A. Isn't that mean? You want an A and a D. Okay, I can do that. All right, so the reason you have an SSH and an SSHD is because not only is there a server process running on this machine so you can log into it, but also Proxmox has an SSH client program running it, so I can SSH to something else on another Proxmox. So that SSH config file refers to the client program, which I can certainly launch right there. But it's not the SSHD service. You would not type in SSHD on the command line like this and run it interactively because you're an end user trying to use it. It'll say something like, well, it's already running, or this is an inappropriate use of this. You're supposed to start this up as a service. So my point is when you're looking for configuration files, usually they're going to end in the letter D, and usually, but not always, they're going to end in the letter, or they're going to have the extension of .conf. Okay, so letter D .conf. Not always. Sometimes it's .config. Sometimes it's .txt for a text file. Or sometimes there's no extension on it at all. But we try to adhere to some standards in Linux. So let's take a look at that SSHD config program. Configuration file. I'm using the less command just to look through it. I'm not editing it, just listing it out. The less command lists out one screen at a time. And I mentioned this last class, but I just want to reiterate this. 99% of the cases in these configuration files, you'll see a lot of lines that look like parameters, and these are parameters. Because what configuration files like to do, or what applications like to do, is give you all the potential parameters, all the potential options that you can change should you want to, but it comments them out because there are certain defaults. Like, for example, the port number. This SSH server on Proxmox is running on the standard port 22. That's kind of a default. It's commented out because you don't need to specify in this configuration file use port 22 because it's hard-coded into the program somewhere. But if I wanted to, for whatever reason, I wanted to obscure this SSHD service and force somebody to know that they're supposed to use port 12345, for example, I could edit this file and I could simply remove Instead of using less, I will use nano. Now, I'm not going to save anything, most likely. But you might want to take that comment out and say, well, I want to run this on port 22005, for example. And what that would do is that would force users, when they're using PuTTY here, new session, that would force me, if I wanted to connect to that IP address again, I would have to change that port number to match what I put in this file. Okay? You want an A, you want an A. I haven't heard from everybody. Corrigan, do you want an A? Does Jacob want an A? Okay. Sonali, do you want an A? Doesn't guarantee you're going to get an A, but I mean, I just want to make sure people are here and paying attention. You have to make that number match up with that port number. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing a lot of in the next few classes here, modifying these most likely already existing configuration files. So if you run nano with a particular file name, which you read somewhere, or you were told you need to edit this file, and you open it up and there's nothing there, I'm not going to say this. For example, let's say you're in your home directory. The fast way to get to the home directory is cd space tilde. That gets you back to your home directory. If you typed in nano sshd config, because Jake said that's the file you need to edit, and you get nothing, you're probably not in the right directory. So pay attention to that. That's probably what your issue was, Rahul. I bet you weren't in the right directory. Pay attention to where you're at. Also, as I showed you yesterday, before you edit the file, find the file first. Make sure you're in the right directory. Find the file that's supposed to exist. And again, in 99% of the cases, there's already going to be a config file. It's already going to exist. All you're doing is modifying it for your use. So you need to find it. Oh, sorry. I'm making tons of typos. I don't have my right contacts in today. Let me blow this up so I can see it better. These over there. Appearing up. Change. 16. That should be big enough for me to see. There we go. I can read that. Okay. Oh, what am I forgetting? I am forgetting the minus LA. A lot of the options in Linux require you to stick a minus sign, indicate it's an option. So there's the sshd config. That's the file I need to edit. So in this case, it's not .conf, it's _config, but it's similar. And most of the time that's given to you, okay? Before you edit it, find it. After you found it, make a copy of it. cpsshd config to sshd config backup one. It can't have spaces in a file name, by the way. .save or .org, the original. Then nano it, nano. So when you type nano, you better get something, some sort of output. Unless you're making, like I said, a brand new config file, which you're almost never doing. Okay. And then again, in most config files, everything is commented out. In this case, if we were to scroll through this sshd config file, I'll bet every single parameter, oh, except for that one, and I think that's because we modified that one, or actually probably Proxmox modified that one, is commented out. Now, we don't necessarily know what the defaults are. You can usually check the man pages for that or Google for that. But there's only a very few. That one's not commented out. So most of these are commented out. So if we're looking at SSHD, by the way, I want you to look at this one because I do want everybody on all of your containers and all of your VMs, I want you to install, if it's not installed, and enable SSHD and permit root login, which normally is not a safe thing to do. Like, it's really not safe for me to have these Proxmox servers exposed, even via an obscure 22002 or 22003 port number, because port scanners find these. But, you know, these aren't production servers or anything, so somebody hacks one of these, it's just your homework gone. But permit root login, where is that? I think it's up at the top, up near the top. We're not going to change the port number, or maybe we might experiment with that later for SSH. That's probably set to permit root login no for those of you that have containers or VMs that you built that did already happen to have the SSH package installed. By default, permit root login is usually set to no, or this is commented out and it's defaulted in the software to no. But I wanted to be able to SSH directly to this server as root. If you took that out, and here's how normally you would do that. You would comment, you would make a change, comment that out, do whatever. I'm going to add a fake comment. Or not a fake comment, I'm just going to add a comment. That's what I usually do when I modify, and I want everybody to get in that good habit. If you make a change in a configuration file, right above the particular item or element that you're changing, put a comment in that includes the date, your initials, and what you changed it to or why you changed it. Then go make the change to it. Or you might even want to duplicate the line. You might want to leave that like that and duplicate that line. If, for example, that was originally permit root login equals no, I might leave the original line, comment it out, and add a new non-commented out line. I think originally in a lot of your client machines, it'll look like that. Okay, so you'll click Control X. It'll ask you, do you want to save these changes? Make sure syntactically you've got the syntax correct. If you mess up the syntax of a configuration file, your service probably won't properly start. Yes. Okay, so now we want to probably restart that service because it's running a RAM already. There's a few different ways. Sometimes you use sysctl or systemctl. Sometimes you use service. It depends on the flavor and distribution and version of Linux. Let's try the service version first with the service sshd restart. Okay, that was probably the right thing to do. We did not get an error, so it probably restarted. How do we know if it restarted? Well, this thing is generating logs. I'm going to show you another folder, and this is true not just for Proxmox, but for most Linux systems. There's a folder called var, so I'm going to go into that folder, a variable folder, and then underneath that folder, there's a folder called log. Now, not all logs are here, but a lot of them are here. This is kind of the generic place where generic logs for a lot of popular what do you call it? Services are operating. So I don't see an SSHD log, but I think it's called actually secure log. Let me Google real quick on Debian. What is the name of the SSHD log? Or where is it located? It may not be in that etc. folder. So let's take a look and see if we can find where it is. Okay, it might be writing it. Some services write to a generic standardized system log. So there's a couple of generic logs. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do ls minus latr. That's a very useful thing to type. ls space minus latr. Give me a listing of everything in that directory by alphabetical order, except give it to me in reverse order of date. And it says there's daemon log and sys log and auth log and last log. These are the ones that have most recently been messed with. Let's take a look at syslog, or let's look in syslog. Less syslog. Don't use nano. Just less syslog out. Not sissy log. I made a mistake. SYS log. It's going to be start at the beginning. Here's a little trick in less. If I want to get to the bottom of the file real quick, hit the Shift G button. The G button goes to the top, Shift G goes to the bottom of the file. Now this is a log that's continuously growing, so it's just going to show me whatever was there when I started the less command. What I'm looking for is I'm looking to see if the SSHD restarted here. I don't see it there. Here's another couple good commands, and this is why I'm showing you this. There's several good file manipulation commands. If I want to see just the last 20 lines of a file, I can use tail, T-A-I-L, minus 20, auth log. I just want to see the last 20 lines of that. And I can see here's some entries here in the system log, and these are supposedly current times and dates. Failed password for root from 192.168.1.156. So somebody from that IP, probably me, failed the login. So log files are going to be very useful for you to use while you're troubleshooting whether you have a certain configuration file configured properly or not. If you want to list out that log on the screen as it's being generated, you can use tail minus 20 and then end that with an F to continuously feed. These last 20 lines, and it's going to continuously feed the file on the screen. So it's stopped. I don't have a prompt now. I can't do anything right now, but it's basically waiting for additional data. Now watch what's going to happen here. I'm going to duplicate this session and log in on another. Where did it go? It's back behind somewhere. Here it is. I'm going to try logging in again and watch what happens down here in this file. It just notated, hey, I accepted the password for root from that IP address on that random port number, doesn't really matter, using the password authentication manager style of Unix/Linux. There it is. Now, if I was a hacker guy or if I was a bad guy, I'm going to do that. Just log back into myself. Oh, let me do this. SSH minus you, Jake. SSH Jake at localhost. intentionally type in the wrong password. Notice how I got an authentication failure there. I'm going to try it again. Another failure there. I tried again, another failure there. So I've got 3 failures in there. At some point, it will give up. It depends on what there's a setting in that SSHD configuration file to say after 3 failed retries or 4 or 5 or something that you can change, give up on them, kick them out. Okay. Now, what fail to ban does, among other things, is it looks through these logs and it looks for patterns. And it looks for the IP address and it looks for failures. And if it sees a certain pattern of failures, like 20 failures in 1 minute from one IP address, well, that's probably a hacker. Whether it's brute force or not, it's probably a hacker. I am going to temporarily enter a filter or apply a firewall rule. So what fail to ban is doing specifically is it is applying firewall rule by reviewing logs periodically, once a minute or once every couple of minutes or once every 30 seconds. Again, that's settable. Fail to ban is a program which is just a script running in the background looking at 4, 5, 6 different logs, a system log, an auth log, web server log, whatever, the SQL logs, whatever logs you tell it. There's several you can add to it. And if it sees a bunch of authorization failures, it'll take that IP address out of there and it'll create a rule for the firewall. So most of these Linux systems all have firewalls, right? By the way, to get out of the tail command, hit Control-C. Now we're back at our prompt. So I'm throwing several things at you today, which aren't necessarily anything to do with installing the LAMP stack, but they're important little sub-tools that you need, things that you need to know for Linux to get you to installing the LAMP stack. So almost all of these are running IP tables. If I type in IP tables by itself, it's going to say, okay, I know about IP tables. Here's IP table version, blah, blah, blah. You need to type in some parameters. This tells you when you type in a command or you type in a name of a package that you read about, if you get some output other than no such command, that means it's installed, you're just not using it properly. If you type in IP tables with these parameters minus lowercase n, uppercase L, what that tells me is it will tell me about any rules that have been added to this table that says either accept a certain type of traffic from somewhere to somewhere, drop it, or reject it. So what fail to ban does is it creates a drop filter. And it says any traffic coming from that IP address, and you can specify different port numbers. You can say just on port SSH22, or fail to ban usually blocks all of the ports, or just generically blocks everything for a particular IP. Because it stands to reason, if a hacker's trying to hack you on the SSH port 22, you're probably going to try to hack you on everything. They're going to try to get into your web server, your FTP server, your SQL server. They're going to try to get into everything. So let's block all of them. Let's block that source IP address. So fail to ban will create a rule, and it'll stick a drop rule in there. And in fail to ban, there's a configuration file for fail to ban if it's running. I don't know if I even have fail to ban running on, no. So fail to ban is not installed on this particular server, and I don't want you to install it on Proxmox. I want you to install fail to ban on one or more of your client machines after we've done some other stuff. I'm just pointing it out to you for now because I just had to modify my fail to ban to change. What I did was I changed the ban time. The ban time by default was only 10 minutes. And so what was happening is these script programs are just continuously running. They're just trying to run. 10 minutes later, they start working again. They get banned for 10 minutes, and they start working again. So I kept getting a bunch of email warnings every 10 minutes. IP address from, Romania or Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic, wherever it was coming from. Some Eastern Bloc country, France, China, where it was coming from. Usually it's a foreign country, was blocked for X amount of failures. And if I see 20 of those in a row in my email, that's most definitely a bot. They call it a bot, a robot, a hacker program that's running. Okay, so keeping those configuration thingies in mind, now maybe Rahul, maybe we can take a look at yours and see what area you may have skipped a step or where you might have messed up. So let's try to log into your container. You mentioned it earlier, 401. So let's see if I can, yeah, let me log into Proxmox 4. On 8006. And I'm also going to use this opportunity to point out if I see anything wrong or anything missing that I want you guys to be adding. Good habits that I want you to be using. So I'm going to click on Proxmox 4 there. I'm going to click on Notes. I don't see any notes yet, Rahul. So I had asked yesterday, make sure to add yourself. Put it right there in the notes for this Proxmox server. Okay? And whoever else is on Proxmox 4. I see Rahul and Jacob. So Jacob's on there too. So Jacob, you need to add some information to that notes file too. So we know so Rahul knows who you are and you know who Rahul is. Or at least you have the Gmail addresses. So you can communicate with each other. You said 401, Rahul. So let me take a look at some stuff here. You're making good notes. I like that. Network. Let's take a look at network here. IP address. Let's make sure that you have given it a proper IP address. 20.206. That does fall within your range. Put the /24 20.1. That's correct for Team 4. Okay. No need to apologize. It's fine. I'm only pointing this out for other people as well to make sure that they're following these best practices. I'm going to assume that we don't know the password. I'm going to cheat, well, not really cheat. I'm just going to enter it without having to know what your root password is by first I SSH to Proxmox. So I'm SSH right here. So I'm going to type in PCT, enter 401. Now I'm the root user as user 401. What step were you on in terms of installing LAMP? You said you were typing in nano and not getting anything. Where were you at? Do you remember? You just got the PHP part left off. So this is Ubuntu, so we're supposed to be using apt. So I'm going to use the up arrow and see if I can tell some of what you did. Oh, okay, I see what you're doing there. So you're following some instruction that is not necessary. I can see what you're doing there. Okay, so var www HTML. So I'm going to check I'm going to check some things for you. So we're going to go to under etc. Apache. Apache 2, I'm looking in the etc. folder because I'm looking for the conf file for Apache. The file there called apache2.conf. That's probably the configuration file I care about. So I'm going to list this out. And I'm doing this because I'm looking for two parameters with respect to network, with respect to web server. You're looking for document root and directory index. Those are the two most important parameters. And I don't know if this is answering your question, but I want to show this to other people, Rahul. These are the two most important things that are going to be in a web server conf file. Okay, so let's search for document root first. So I'm going to, unless I can do a / and type in what I want to look for, document root. Didn't find it there. And actually, and I know why. It's because Apache puts these things in different files. Grab document. Look in every file for that. So I don't see that specified. Document root, where is this supposed to be? It's in possibly different files. Is this Ubuntu 18, by the way? Do you remember, Rahul? I'm going to assume it is. Okay, there's where it's supposed to be. Etc. Apache 2 sites available yourdomain.com. There it is. That's 000default.com. And there it is, document root. All I wanted to show you guys was that this is the folder based on this configuration that's supposed to have your very first document in it. So, and then also directory index. That's the next thing I wanted to show you. Directory index. Which is supposed to be there. So what you have not yet done, Rahul, is you have not edited this file as specified there, and you have not put index.php at the beginning of this list. So if an index.html exists, it will never run index.php. So let's go to var www.html. Okay, I see an index.html. So if you were using links to test this with, or I'm actually going to use my browser. What's the address that you gave it? 20.206. So if I go to 12.168.20.206, I won't see any porn while I. Okay. You're getting the Apache 2 Ubuntu default page. And did not read that index.html file. Oh, and that's because that's the one that it gets created for you. You need to move that. I'm not going to do it for you, but what you need to do to continue here, Rahul, is you need to move this file out of the way. The existing index.html that you see there. In other words, rename it something else with the mv command. mv is for move. mv is move. So move that to another file, index.html.save. Create your own index.html file with just a little bit of simple HTML in it, which hopefully you learned in a previous class to just say, hi, I'm Rahul, or whatever. Then go back to your web browser, or as I showed yesterday, go use links. Look at localhost. And you should see the hi, I'm Rahul stuff there. Okay, so that's one area where you've not finished. Then you need to go edit. You think you know what to do there? Okay, good. So why don't you continue on? Does anybody else want me to look at theirs? Are they getting stuck somewhere? Can we use anybody else as a guinea pig? How about you, Jacob? Are you here today? You're not far enough, so where are you? Okay, so at what point are you? What's stopping you guys? Where are you? Are you stuck somewhere, or is it just, or are you having time issues like I am? Okay, so if you've got some time, I'll give you some time here. Well, I'll end the class a little bit early because I got some 4477 papers to grade. And you guys need to make sure that you get a working container that's got working internet on it. Grab that over there. So let's see, I see an Ubuntu Jacob. Is that doing anything yet? Like if I were to fire that up, does it run yet, or did you just create it? It's still on DHCP, so you need to change that. Oh, use Zachary's? Okay. What team are you on, Zachary? Remind me. Team 2, okay. Oh, that's right. You're on team 2 with me. Zachary, oh, that's team 4, excuse me, where's 2? I thought I logged into 2. Oh, no, I logged into 20.200, not 10.200. Excuse me, guys. Okay, so I'm looking, let me just look while I'm looking. Don't see any information there for you, Zachary, so add yourself under the notes. I see 204 and I see 205 as a VM. Which one did you mess with? Which one do you want me to look at? 204. Okay, so let's check to see, did you change your network to an appropriate number, 10.204/24, as long as that doesn't exist on any of these others, we should be okay. So let's see, 204. And actually, instead of using, no, I'm going to still use SSH. The reason I'm going to use SSH, by the way, instead of the console screen, even though I have copy and paste capability, is one of the commands that we use in Nanu, the Control W command, actually will close the console window. So we don't want that to happen. So you do want to try to use SSH whenever possible. Where'd it go? Plenty config over there. 192.168.10.200. Log in. It's on my other screen over here, so grab it. Blow this up because I can barely see that. Appearance, change, get bigger. I'm sure I could make this default, but I just am too lazy right now. And it's 204, so I'm going to enter. Okay, so I'm the root user 204. What do you want to look at? What are we looking for? To see whether you've got it working or not? See whether you got LAMP working? Okay, so I see, what is that .info.php.swp though, by the way? Was that something else that you were reading? Test.php. The less command is not found. And we use the good old more command because more was original. You don't have less. That's terrible. You should use less. Wait a minute. Oh, this is CentOS. Yum. Install less. Less is better. Less is a better version of more. People say, why do they call it less? Because of that old beer commercial, less is more. I prefer less. So there, I just installed a new app for you. Okay, so you're executing, supposedly it should execute this code. Now, has anybody maybe tried to do this, and rather than executing the PHP code, you just got that on the web page, that actual text? If you ever see that, that means PHP is not installed and it's not running the PHP program in the background to interpret what that command is. So if you ever get a web page of the raw text, that means that package is not installed. So let's see, did you install links? Let's try it right here from localhost. HTTP localhost. Or you could have typed in the actual local IP address of 127.0.0.1. That's the same thing as localhost. /test.php. It looks correct. 192.168.10.204 was it? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't put test.php. That's just testing of the Apache server. All right, so Zachary's got it working. And he got it working on CentOS. So it was about the same as what I showed you guys yesterday, right? It was just a little bit different. So you followed the DigitalOcean version of how to do it on CentOS 7, which is almost the same thing. It's actually easier on CentOS than it is in Apache. So does anybody else have any stopping places they want me to look at in front of the class so we can use this as a learning opportunity or a backpatting opportunity or whatever you want to say? Can you guys work on this so that you've got a working, do it in a container. Now that you've got this working in a container, Zachary, why don't you see if you can figure out, this will be a challenge for you. I see you've got a, no, that's not Zachary, here's Zachary. I see that you've got a CentOS 7 VM working there. Now, one thing that you can't do in CentOS 7 VM from outside of it is we can't change the IP address. That's got to be done internally. How do you do that? Okay, so you haven't finished installing that. So that's what I'd like you to do in particular, and anybody else that's already gotten this properly working on their container, go finish installing a VM. Either of the same, it might be better to install the same version, the same distribution in your VM as that you just did in the container. So if you installed a CentOS 7 container, find a CentOS 7 minimal ISO file, download that, upload that to your Proxmox, and get that installed. If you did Ubuntu, do Ubuntu. Get an Ubuntu VM installed. See if you can figure out how to make that a static IP, and it's going to be different depending on whether it's CentOS or Ubuntu. How to change to static IP in CentOS 7. I'm not going to type in VM, just CentOS 7. And it will point you to, in the case of CentOS, that file which you need to edit. Normally it has in there boot proto DHCP, but you're going to say boot proto or protocol. That's what that stands for, is none. And you're going to hard code an IP version 4 address right there. There's the /24 or the net mask right there. So you're going to hard code that information into that file. That's how you do it in CentOS. Similar in Ubuntu, similar in Debian. So that's your marching orders for those of you that have successfully gotten the LAMP stack installed. So I'm going to start checking. I'll make an assignment. I know I said I would, but I'm still grading the other stuff for the other class. That says install the LAMP stack on a container. Give me the container number so I can go log into it and look at it. Excuse me, gosh, I need some coffee. And to make sure that you've installed the LAMP stack and that you've edited that index.php file, which has taught you a few things. It's taught you how to use package installer. It's taught you how to navigate through and find the correct folders where stuff is supposed to live. And then we can start doing stuff on top of that. And I want you to try to duplicate that same thing in the VM. And again, you'll have to follow an internal procedure based on your distribution to change this IP in the VM. Now, if it's a GUI, let's pretend it's not a GUI. Here's another thing you need to type in. How do I change static IP Ubuntu 18 command line? Add that, or console, add that. Otherwise, it might point you to a GUI method of doing it, but if you're not running a GUI environment on your VM, you don't have a GUI. So you have to use the command line of the console version. So here's the console version of doing that in Ubuntu 18. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end here, unless anybody else has any other questions. Again, your marching orders are, make sure you've got a CentOS container. I'd like to see, and I'm going to start making this stuff mandatory and put dates on it if I don't start seeing stuff pop up. I'd like to see by tomorrow, everybody running at least one container that you've installed LAMP on, and that you're following the recommended best practices and guidelines for properly notating everything, properly taking snapshots. So like I'm going to look, for example, actually, and do this, don't delete your snapshots initially. I want to see some proof that you're creating snapshots. So Zachary can tell me, oh yes, I created snapshots, but I can't see that in any way. So for the rest of you that haven't gotten it installed yet, don't delete your snapshots. I want to see that you're making snapshots along the way, along every step of the way of installing LAMP. I want to see that you're making backups. I do see, okay, good. Zachary made a backup today at 12:34 in the morning. So you were up at 12:30 this morning doing this, right, Zachary? Oh, I know that I know it said to delete them, Zachary, that's fine. I'm just telling everybody from this point forward, because it didn't occur to me, I won't easily be able to tell unless I look through the logs the log file. It may be way far down in the log at this point. I won't necessarily see, like I see right there, Zach Fucci, snapshot VM205. So that satisfies me. I'll see that, and that satisfies me. But it's easier for me to see the snapshots in there just by going to the console screen. So everybody else, don't delete your snapshots. We'll delete them later on. It's not really affecting us that much right now. It takes up a little bit of hard drive space, but that's it. Okay, any questions about what you are supposed to be working on? Any questions about my expectations, what I want to see tomorrow? Tomorrow, we will start talking about, or we'll finish talking about fail to ban, because I think that's probably the very next thing that I want you guys to install on all of your containers and all of your VMs, just to get into that good habit. Install some of these anti-hacker tools. And so we'll talk about fail to ban, and we'll talk about firewalling and IP tables. So all three of these terms are related to each other. Fail to ban, firewall, and IP tables. IP tables is the firewall for, not IO tables, excuse me, IP tables is the firewall program for Linux on most Linuxes. We're going to also probably need to understand the concept of cron, or cron D, I should say, because fail to ban uses cron. And I'll just briefly describe what cron is. Cron is the method by which you schedule chronological. That's what that stands for, chronology. That's the method by which you schedule jobs like fail to ban, schedule scripts like fail to ban to execute every X amount of minutes or X amount of hours or X amount of days. Without cron, there's a cron tab, a cron table, and a cron job running on every, I promise, on every single one. Let's see, I'm logged out there. That's another one of those things which is running on every Linux server. Don't lie to me now. Cron. There's cron running, cron D actually, because it's a daemon, it's a service. So there's a program running in the background which looks at a table to see, was there anything scheduled for me to run? What am I supposed to run? Oh, I need to run, among other things, I need to run fail to ban. I go run fail to ban. Fail to ban fires up because it's not running all the time. Fail to ban fires up, goes and looks at a particular system log and decides what should I do there. Okay, so I'll talk to you tomorrow about cron, fail to ban. You can Google these things right now. And again, for purposes of our class, whenever you're Googling for something, stick the word Linux in front. Linux fail to ban, Linux firewall, Linux IP tables, Linux cron D. To give you a little bit of background before tomorrow as to what these packages or these programs or these applications are and why they're important and why we use them in Linux. Okay? So, and I apologize, I profusely apologize. Yesterday, apparently, I did not turn the recording back on when I came back to the class and did not record yesterday. Do you guys think I really need to record that again? I can, I will if I need to. But that's why I sent a rather long announcement / email out saying, well, this is where you need to be. So, okay, Jessica, so just for you, I will, no, not just for you, for everybody, I'll go ahead and re-record. It's not going to be tonight. I'm running out of steam and I got stuff I got to grade. Running out of steam today. But I'll get it on probably tomorrow. I'll get it on. But for right now, see how far you can get with just the announcement and the description of how to get to SSH on your Proxmox, how to use the PCT enter command to enter your container. You can only do this with containers. You can't enter a VM. To enter a VM, you have to use SSH. If you can't use the console, and that's only going to work if your SSH service is running. So on that VM that Zach created earlier that's not yet installed, SSH may or may not be installed, so it's got to get installed. Then you've got to edit a configuration file to allow root login, for example. So I'll talk about that tomorrow also. We'll take a look. So hopefully Zach or somebody by tomorrow will have a VM running. We'll go look at the same thing in the VM. We'll employ those few things there. Fail to ban. And then on Friday, we'll start talking about WordPress. You can look up WordPress now. Has anybody ever heard of WordPress? It's probably the most commonly used web authoring tool out there. So by the end of this semester, everybody will be running a container and a VM with the LAMP stack installed. And we're also actually before WordPress. I should not have mentioned WordPress first. I should have mentioned Webmin first. We're going to install Webmin package so that we can create domains. We're going to create our own domain names. Then we're going to install WordPress on one or more virtual domains. So you can go Google for those things now if you want. So on Friday, we'll talk about Webmin and I'll mention WordPress, but primarily we're going to work on Webmin on Friday. Tomorrow we'll finish talking about that with respect to VMs and make sure that everybody understands firewalls. It's kind of in some of my networking class stuff, but I've got to teach you about firewalls because every single distribution now that you install has a firewall already enabled, and firewalls for us, in terms of learning, they get in the way. So we have to either turn them off, which is not a good idea, or we have to learn how to punch holes through that firewall so that we can make our web servers accessible through the firewall, so that we can SSH in from the outside wall through our firewalls. Okay? I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm going to stop the recording, but everybody else is going to keep working, right? You're going to keep working on your containers and your VMs. Email me if you're stuck anywhere. I'm getting a little bit of email, but not very much. Mostly from the 4477 class crying about exam 1. But so if you're stuck anywhere, don't just go, oh, well, I give up. Nano was a blank page or whatever. Email me. Tell me, hey, Jake, or Professor Messenger, whatever you want to call me. Hey, you. I'm stuck here. Here's my container number. I ran Nano and nothing's there. Or I ran PHP info, or I ran this test PHP and I did not get anything. Tell me where you're at, and I'll try to push you on to the next step. I don't want us to get bogged down at this point because we spent a lot of time. We spent too much time in the beginning not really doing much because of VPN requirements and punching holes in the sonic wall firewall here so you can get in the lab. Okay? See you guys tomorrow. Stop the share here. Go Cougs.